We will be opposing this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā. The Green Party supported the Exclusive Economic Zone and Extended Continental Shelf Bill at its introduction because we recognise the need for an effective environmental management regime for the oceans. But we voted against it. It's the second reading, and we'll be voting against it today because this bill is not adequate to do that job. And before explaining why, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank all of the submitters. There were a number of very detailed and constructive submissions that made very good suggestions as to how to amend the bill. Unfortunately, a lot of those suggestions did not get taken up. And would also like to thank the officials from the Ministry for the Environment and Select Committee. Mr. Speaker, our reliance on dirty fossil fuels is the major contributor to human-induced climate change, and we must accelerate our move away from our dependence on fossil fuels. Yet this bill does nothing to address climate change, and in fact it provides a key platform for this government's fossil full agenda to open up the EEZ to oil exploration. As Greenpeace said recently, and I quote, "New Zealand is missing the opportunity to share in the economic and jobs bonanza created by clean energy due to the government passing laws to promote its fossil fuel agenda at the expense of clean energy." Mr. Speaker, this is one of those laws. The government blocked the Green Party SOP, which would have allowed the Minister, in making regulations, and the Environmental Protection Authority, when deciding on marine consent applications, to take into account how an activity contributed to climate change. And it's entirely appropriate for a national level body such as the EPA to consider how the quest for extreme oil, such as deep water oil, contributes and exacerbates climate change. Mr. Speaker, we oppose this bill because it takes insufficient account of our responsibility under the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention to preserve and protect the marine environment. And that's because the suite of matters in clauses 33 and 59 don't give priority to the preservation and protection of the marine environment as UNCLOS requires. Certainly, decision makers under both those sections are required to take into account the importance of protecting biological diversity and the integrity of marine ecosystems, but the Minister and the EPA must give exactly the same weight to these as they give to the economic benefits of activities which are applying for consent. So it's that fact that there is no priority given to environmental matters that means that the bill fails to implement UNCLOS. And it would have been very easy to have amended the bill so that it was much more consistent with those international responsibilities. We oppose it because of the very generous provision in the Minister's SOP 100, the Anadarko Amendment, which potentially allows companies which are planning exploration activities in the EEZ to do this without getting a marine consent. And as Edison, and yes, they do it at the moment, but this bill is designed to set in place a consenting regime. But the new transitional provisions, which extend the transitional period from the 1st of May 2013, as it was in the original bill, to the 1st of May 2014, give companies like Texan giant Anadarko, Austrian oil giant OMV, the right to, if they've got a permit from an allocation permit, to actually go ahead with their oil exploration without getting a marine consent under this legislation. So what is the point of the legislation if we've got such generous transitional provisions? It's also inadequate because while the original purpose clause of balancing has been improved by the Minister, and we commend that, to one of sustainable management, that whole purpose clause sits on its own. Unlike the RMA and Section 104, decision makers don't have to make their decisions subject to the purpose of sustainable management. So it's completely different from the RMA. It's got very limited provisions around implementing the Crown's treaty responsibilities, as Rino Tirakatani noted, and there's no general obligation to implement and give effect to the treaty. There are a number of constructive suggestions made by Te Runanga o Ngāi Tahu and others to provide for cultural impact assessments. Those weren't taken on board by government because they blocked green SOPs. And, Mr Speaker, one of the other reasons is the way in which the Environment Court has sidelined the very valuable contribution it's made to the development of case law and policy under the RMA, and there's no opportunity for that here.
Jackie Dean.
My contribution to this third reading of the EEZ bill by just reminding of the House